So what you're seeing right now is Doom Eternal running flawlessly on Linux with ray tracing enabled on a Radeon 6700 XT. In fact, thanks to a recent Vulkan driver update, gaming on Linux has become so good that I finally decided to ditch Windows completely and remove it from my system. Surprisingly, some games actually seem to be running better in Linux when compared to Windows. I currently have the game running at an internal resolution of 1440p and is being upscaled to my 4K monitor thanks to FSR. As you can see, the frame rate is pretty good. It's not quite 60 FPS, but it's pretty close. And if you don't believe ray tracing is on, you can clearly see the Doom Slayer's reflection in the window here. Now I'll turn off ray tracing to show the difference. By the way, I'm running at a mixture of Nightmare and Ultra Nightmare settings. I'm also screen capturing all this footage in OBS using the GPU's hardware acceleration for encoding, so performance would be a bit better if I wasn't recording. Now you can see those reflections aren't there anymore. But the reason why I'm using the GPU encoding is to prove that Linux is perfectly viable for streamers as well. Without ray tracing, I can now set it to native 4K resolution without breaking a sweat. But it's not just games that were holding me back from dropping Windows completely. There's also a handful of productivity applications I use, including video production software, digital audio workstations, also known as DAWs for short, and CAD software such as Fusion 360 and SolidWorks. Well, it turns out all of these applications are working great on Linux as well, but I'll be talking more about productivity software another day, so stay tuned for that video if you're interested in non-gaming applications. This video will solely focus on gaming. To be honest, I'm not super into gaming since I'm usually busy working on projects, but I still manage to find at least 5 or 6 hours each week to enjoy some good old gaming sessions to take a break from real life. Now, this video isn't meant to be a detailed step-by-step guide, but I'll point you in the right direction and give a general overview of how you can get a great gaming experience on Linux. I'll be talking about this while showing you some gameplay from various games that I've been playing recently. Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition is another demanding game that not only supports ray tracing, but it requires it by default, so let's see how that performs. I have the resolution set for 1440p and high graphics settings. And as you can see, performance is smooth and it runs great. It does occasionally dip below 60 FPS, but still, this is good performance considering this is a mid-range GPU, and the RDNA 2 series doesn't handle ray tracing very well. It certainly doesn't run any better on Windows. Keep in mind, getting a good gaming experience with Linux does require some tinkering and installation of additional software packages, so I realize it's not for everyone. But if you've had previous experience with modding games and editing config files, then you should definitely consider making the switch. I'll admit it's still not perfect though, but it's getting really close. There might be a few games that have bugs here and there, especially with brand new titles. But this doesn't affect someone like me who waits until a game goes on sale for around 20 bucks before purchasing it anyway. And thanks to frequent driver updates, it usually only takes a few weeks for brand new AAA titles to become playable, so it's not that big of a deal. Linux gaming has been slowly getting better and better over the years, partly thanks to the Steam Deck and Valve's commitment to improving Proton and ironing out the issues that have been associated with gaming. One of these issues that has kept me away until recently is stuttering due to shader compilation. From what I gather, Nvidia cards have had a fix for this for a while now, but not AMD cards. Up until recently, that is. Basically, the problem was that anytime you loaded a new map that you haven't played before, there would be massive stuttering due to the shaders being compiled on the fly. For multiplayer games, this can be annoying at first, but the problem goes away pretty quickly since many assets are typically reused throughout the maps. However, this stuttering can be pretty annoying in single-player games since you'll constantly be encountering new assets as you progress through the game. To help mitigate this, Steam has implemented an option called shader precaching, which will compile most of these shaders before starting the game. It works well for most games, but not all. Some games still had noticeable stuttering even with this option enabled. But thanks to this new Vulkan driver update, stuttering issues are a thing of the past now. I'll leave the link to this article if you want to read more about it, but basically the latest Mesa 23.1 driver has finally implemented the Graphics Pipeline Library, or GPL for short, which can achieve a 50,000% improvement in shader linking times according to this article. At the time of this recording, I still had this environment variable set in the commands on Steam for each game, but this shouldn't be necessary anymore. With the newest Mesa 23.1 drivers, this option should be enabled by default. If using an Arch-based distro, you'll want to install this package from the AUR to get the latest drivers for AMD cards. Other distros such as Ubuntu are still perfectly fine for gaming, but if you want the latest drivers, best performance, and best compatibility with new games, then I suggest using an Arch-based distro. One game where I noticed a massive improvement while using the newest drivers was in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which used to have stuttering issues for me, but as you can see, gameplay is super smooth now. I just recently started playing this game and have been enjoying it a lot. I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan, but I liked it a lot when I was a kid, and I still have the original trilogy on VHS. But I am a big fan of Souls-like games and tend to enjoy challenging games, and this one doesn't disappoint. I'm running the game at an internal resolution of 2960 by 1665, and again, it's being upscaled with FSR, so it looks really nice. Graphics settings are mostly maxed out except shadows and post-processing. Speaking of Souls-like games, I've been eagerly awaiting for Elden Ring to go on sale so I can finally play what looks like a masterpiece of a game. Now let's talk more about the Steam launch options and take a look at what I've set for Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition. You can see I've set the GPL variable here, along with the RT to get ray tracing enabled. The next two commands are also required to enable DX12 features, but most games won't need these. GameMode Run enables the Pharaoh gaming mode, which can be downloaded from this package here. This improves CPU scheduling for better gaming performance, and I recommend it for most games. The last one here is MangoHud, which provides the statistics overlay and can be installed with this package. Also, another package I want to mention is VK Basalt, which is similar to Reshade on Windows if you've ever used that. It's a post-processing layer that allows you to enhance the visuals and apply various types of anti-aliasing, which is great for games that lack a good built-in anti-aliasing. Also, another thing I wanted to point out is the Proton version. In most cases, you don't need to worry about this, as Steam will take care of it for you, but there are custom Proton versions that you can download as well, such as Proton GE Custom, which can further improve performance on some games. Now let's move away from Steam games and look at a few other launchers including Blizzard's Battle.net and Epic Games. Unlike Steam, these applications are not native Linux apps, but can still be run using Wine. There are a few different applications that use Wine under the hood and automatically handle all of its configurations, which allows users to easily run these launchers. A few examples are Lutris, which can run a variety of launchers including Battle.net, Epic Games, and a few others. Heroic Games Launcher is another popular one, but this one can only handle Epic Games and GOG games. Both of these are good options, but personally I recommend using Bottles instead, which can be installed with Flatpak. Bottles allows users to easily configure self-contained Windows environments that can be geared towards gaming or geared towards non-gaming applications. You can install pretty much any Windows application and not worry about tweaking the advanced settings and dependencies for Wine, making it extremely easy to use. It also includes pre-made installers for a variety of applications that normally are exceptionally difficult to get working with Wine, but are a complete breeze to get set up in Bottles. So first let's try Blizzard's Battle.net launcher, and then afterwards I'll play a game from the Epic Games launcher, both of which have a pre-made installer in Bottles. Now I used to be a huge fan of StarCraft. When Brood War first came out, I was in middle school and it instantly became one of my favorite games to play with friends. That's why when StarCraft 2 came out about 10 years later, I was one of the first people grinding away on the ladder. I spent countless hours in StarCraft 2 and was quite competitive in it. I usually played as random race on the ladder, and I almost made it into the 1v1 Masters League numerous times, and actually made it into the team-based Masters League a few times. But I started to get burned out on it when Legacy of the Void came out. Also, I was starting grad school around that time and didn't have much time to play anymore. But StarCraft 2 still holds a special place in my heart, and it's been disappointing to see Blizzard slowly fall apart ever since Activision acquired them. But luckily, some ex-StarCraft 2 developers have band together to form a new company and are currently developing a new game that's very similar to StarCraft. It's called Stormgate, and I'm really looking forward to trying it out. Recently, I started playing a few games of StarCraft 2 here and there, but I'm not as good as I used to be. Right now you're seeing footage from a game I recently played on the ladder. This was a really good game, and I was worried I might have lost this big battle, but I was able to win the game. I also like to play a few of the arcade games, and most of them work perfectly fine in Linux. However, I have encountered one that seems to have an issue with Wine and will crash when loading. This problem can probably be resolved by using a different Wine version, or it might have something to do with the dependencies. I haven't looked into it yet because the vast majority of arcade games work without a hitch, so it's not a huge deal for me. Another factor that's important for multiplayer games is latency, which is another thing I was worried might be worse in Linux. But I'm happy to say the latency is extremely low, especially after some tweaks. For starters, I suggest using the Wayland display protocol as opposed to X11. It offers advanced scaling features and very low latency, especially after changing these settings. Wayland is newer and more advanced, but is still considered in the beta stages, so you might encounter a few bugs here and there. For example, if you have a 4K monitor and use the 200% scaling setting like I do, you'll notice games will be limited to 1080p resolution. This can be solved by lowering the scaling setting to 100% before starting a game, but of course this will make all the other apps appear small. This isn't a big deal as you can adjust the scaling at any time, but hopefully this gets fixed at some point. Variable refresh monitors are also supported, such as AMD's FreeSync. The Wayland protocol also natively enforces complete frames to be displayed on the screen, which means you can disable VSync to further reduce latency and you won't need to worry about screen tearing. Latency Flex is another package that does some CPU tweaks to further reduce latency. The combination of these tweaks allow games to run with minimal latency, and I really can't feel any difference between this and the Windows version. By the way, I have this game running at native 4K resolution and maxed out graphics settings. Now let's see how well the Epic Games launcher works. I'll be playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. It's running at a resolution of 3200 by 1800 with FSR, and the graphics are almost maxed out except for shadows. This is another game that brings back a lot of nostalgia for me, since I was a skater in middle school and high school. I was pretty decent at street skating and would frequently go to skate parks and other locations. I could do a decent amount of tricks including 360 flips, kick flips off stairs and ledges, and mostly street stuff, but I wasn't anywhere near pro level or anything like that. But anyway, the Tony Hawk games are classic arcade style fun and were a blast to play with friends. These games had some killer soundtracks too, and I especially liked the 90s punk rock that was frequently featured in the games. Unfortunately, I can't turn on the game's music for this video or I'd probably get a copyright strike. But yeah, anyone who grew up during this era knows what I'm talking about. These games are classics and the remakes are really good too. The graphics look great and the controls are super tight. It feels almost exactly the same as I remember it over 20 years ago on the original PlayStation. And best of all, performance is excellent on Linux. I noticed at one point, one or two of the sound effects weren't playing correctly, but other than that, I haven't encountered any issues. So yeah, hopefully I've convinced you by now that gaming on Linux is absolutely viable in 2023. Not only is it viable, but some games actually seem to run smoother when compared to Windows. But like I said, Linux gaming isn't always as straightforward as Windows, and you might find yourself needing to install additional software packages and modifying a few configuration files to get the game running optimally. But once you set these things up properly, it's smooth sailing from there. I hope you guys found this to be informative as well as entertaining. If you did, then be sure to like the video and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I cover all sorts of tech-related content, including advanced topics such as programming, circuits, engineering, and even DIY guitar gear. I try to do varied content to keep things fresh. Also, feel free to leave a comment and let me know your experience with Linux gaming, or if you're considering on making the switch at some point. Thanks for watching and see you all next time.